more love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life. You're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. And I'm Susan Burrell, and we are all about a show that inspires us to live our lives better, live the life you were born to live in. And we invite people to tune in and tune up and develop a power perspective. So I'm excited today to bring on the show an author who's written a really fabulous book, and it's called Soul Currency, Investing Your Inner Wealth for Fulfillment and Abundance. And I want to welcome to the show Ernest Chu. Hi, Ernie.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
I am so glad you're here. So, let me just intro you to the listening folks. I'm just going to tell everybody where you come from, and then we can dive into soul currency. So, Ernest Chu, in more than 35 years as an investment banker, corporate executive, entrepreneur, has become widely recognized as an expert on financing emerging growth companies. I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, Ernie. He's created more than $1.5 billion in market value for his clients. He's an abundance coach, and he's evaluated thousands of business proposals and advised hundreds of emerging companies, serving as a leader and business coach to 9 early-stage companies, with 5 of those companies becoming public companies. Oh, my goodness. You're a busy guy, Ernest.
Well, I did it for 45 years.
Holy moly. So it's interesting because you come from it sounds like diverse, but for 45 years, business background, money background. And you've written this book, which I have been so enjoying, called Soul Currency, because it talks to me in my language, which is about how to live your life from the inside out, how to access your soul currency. Hey.
Yes.
And then put it into business. So
well, it doesn't have to be pigeonholed as business. It can be anything in your life. Because what we're really looking at, and the soul currency makes no distinction between the type of work that you do and but more what your intention is, and how to really activate the flow of moving toward your intention and creating the flow to let it continue to grow.
Okay, so and because of the title, it sounds like this is a book about money. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what is the intention behind soul currency?
Well, you won't find the word money used a lot in the book. Mm-hmm. It actually, you find the word flow, you find the word resources, currency, intention. But really what it is to really understand that money is nothing more than symbols and agreements that change all the time. Remember that there's different types of currencies, which is different types of money, and that's the different types of agreements, like the yen and the Chinese money and the renminbi and the franc and the euro and things of that type. Those things change probably on a by minute, and so those agreements change all the time. And they are really only symbols because we allow them to be. Like gold is a symbol. It's we treat it as if it's real, but it's really a symbol. The real currency is inside.
Okay, so I want to get to that in just a minute. The real currency is inside, but for people that, because you have had, $1.5 billion of money with these companies you've worked with, right? And I'm saying money. it's interesting. So for somebody like me, or somebody like the common person who doesn't have a stock portfolio, who's living from paycheck to paycheck, it's interesting that you say money is a symbol and an agreement that changes, because sometimes it feels like it's written in stone. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's like, oh my gosh, if I don't pay my mortgage, I won't have a house written in stone.
Of course, it sounds very real because we think of it all the time, and therefore it becomes disproportionately real. When in fact it's really the inside, your soul's, shall we say, resources, the talents, the things that we have within us that we come into this life with and we develop. And it's a form of currency that we marshal to invest in the outer world for flow and success. And that's the whole definition of soul currency, is to really understand that it's, in a sense, the orchestration or the symphony that all these talents that we come in, and that we get to really write that symphony or play somebody else's symphony, but do it in our own way. And that when we do that, it becomes a form of currency that we use to create what we now call real currency, which is really no more than the symbols and agreements, but it shows up as dollar bills or higher value in your stock portfolio or whatever it is. But it's really a case of flow, because that's really what it is. 75% of the families in the United States live from paycheck to paycheck.
Oh my goodness!
And will have real issues if that paycheck stops. And that's why I say that when some people say, "Well, okay, I've got a job, I got money coming in," and I say, "Well, you're at that point of what we call sustainability."
Right.
Now, most of us think that sustainability it's a good thing. Well, yes, but it is flow with fear.
Yes.
Which means that, hey, if you don't get that money, or if the company goes out of business, or they're starting to lay off people or whatever, all of a sudden, what happens when you don't have it? And it's the same thing. You can apply that to the environmental movement, too. You say, well, gee, if we don't cut down on our emissions, this is what's going to happen to the atmosphere, and to all of a sudden we'll get global warming, things of that type. So it's flow with fear. What we really choose to do is to be at a place where you have choice, and you really have learned to create, because really, in a sense, if you look at anybody that has really created, shall we say, amassed a major fortune, because I don't like to use the word amass, because that seems to really tend to think that it's not really a dynamic, creative process, but it is. Most of the people, if you look at the obvious ones like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, that's all creative. If you look at even the people that have a nice business and how they have their day-to-day, if you got to see a lot about what they had to accomplish on a day-to-day basis, you'll find that a lot of it is creativity. And so you really create abundance, you create flow, or you allow it to happen. And that, because a lot of us know what it is to create, but often we don't allow it to happen. We sort of get in our own way.
Right. We think we can create in certain areas of our life. Like I can create a really lovely home, but I certainly can't create a paycheck that pays for that home.
So you think.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. So let's talk about this, because I was having a conversation with a client earlier this morning, because unemployment has changed and stopped in this month of January. Mm-hmm. And this person was on unemployment, and so to talk them off of the ceiling about where their money is coming from, or can come from, or what kind of job they can get now that they don't have unemployment. It was like swimming in a puddle of muck to get this person to comprehend the idea of choice and co-creation and all that. So what would you say to somebody like that who's really living in the muck of fear, can't quite, get it off of them, and doesn't know how to get out of it to move forward? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say two things. I would say that, one, they need to slow down. It's like getting lost in the woods.
Oh.
What do they tell you when you get lost in the woods? They tell you, hey, don't go just going any direction to see where there's a road or a path or something like that. But to sit down, find a tree, sit under it, and sort of pull yourself together and get an idea of where things are, and if you're smart enough to realize that moss grows on a certain side of the tree, you'll be able to do that, or you can look out and see where the sun is if there's no sun. So in general,
you're reminding me of another client I was speaking to today who's been out of work for 3 months, and her default mechanism is to set a goal and go towards it. But there's also a reason why you're not necessarily having in a job right now for people. There's oftentimes when there's that break in between, it's because what you're just saying, Ernest, it's time to sit down and clarify who you are and what you desire to experience in your life. Yes? Yes.
And often some people are clear enough to be able to see that. More often than not, a lot of people are still living in the story of their last job that either didn't work out or ended, or the fruitless search, or
right.
the almost search, or whatever.
Right. I almost got it, but not yet.
Yeah.
There's so funny. I've been having all these conversations this week, you can tell, because I'm also talking to somebody who feels like they're hanging in limbo between one gig and the next, and the space between both jobs is so vast that they don't know what they're supposed to do in the middle with, you know what I mean, waiting for the one job. The one job's ended, but the other job hasn't started, and what do they do in the middle of that, in that limbo place? Yeah,
because they feel like their expenses keep continuing, but the income is sporadic. It's coming in at different times. The timing's not quite correct. But I would say that in some of these cases, you do have to, if it provides you with some peace of mind, then obviously the obvious thing is to look at getting a part-time job that probably is not going to be what you're really going to end up looking for. But it's important, because if you're not, if you're one of these people that has to have something, and that all you're going to do is think about you're going to drown if there's nothing coming in.
Right.
Because a lot of people, and I've been there.
Me too.
I was $1 million in debt, and I couldn't declare bankruptcy. So
you were $1 million in debt?
Yes.
Oh, how?
I had a company that I raised money for, and I was involved with. Turned out my partner, well, we won't really go into much detail on, but my partner had misrepresented their background, and all of a sudden, to put it mildly, the money that the investors that had come in that were excited about what was happening found that out, and all of a sudden everything got pulled, and I had actually guaranteed some of the money that we had, and I had obviously put in a very substantial amount of my own, and I was at great risk, because I had always thought that being committed was like betting the farm.
Right.
You should probably never bet the farm, but I did. And that's what happened. I was $1 million in debt.
So you were left holding the $1 million bag, and
I could have declared bankruptcy, but then I never would have been able to be in the financial arena again.
Oh.
It would have been a disclosure item, and obviously to some people it's a plus, but most of the people it's a very negative, run the other way kind of disclosure.
Especially if your business is in the world of finance. Yes, I get that.
That's exactly right.
So so when you're talking about this flow idea, did you apply that, the creative flow, or let's talk a little bit more of how you applied that to getting out of this debt?
Well, first of all, it was a new experience for me because I grew up wanting to, from immigrant parents that taught me values of working hard and, earning money. And I started working when I was 11 years old, delivering papers. And then I had a job splitting logs. And then I looked into, later on, I thought I could get something a little better. So I became a tennis pro, teaching tennis in high school and college. But I was working all the time. I've been working since I was 11, and we always had to, paid your bills, et cetera, like so. So all of a sudden now, having all these creditors, and then of course I was highly leveraged because of my decision to sort of bet the farm, and so that came back to haunt me. And of course, I was fortunate enough to sell my house before it was foreclosed, but I didn't. I ended up with virtually nothing, and then basically I still had close to $1 million in debt. And I went through a very dark time where I literally experienced what it was like to go into a grocery store and not being able to buy roughly 99% of what I looked at.
Yeah, I've been there, done that.
So
it's frightening, isn't it?
Well, it is. I was very fortunate. I was at a time where the Japanese were introducing ramen noodles.
Oh, yeah, I remember
and
those.
If you remember that time, they were selling these things for 20 for $1 or something like that. So you can almost eat for about 2 weeks, on about $1 worth of food. Of course, there were a lot of other things that I had to deal with, and it was really a rather bleak time, and a way that I kind of had to figure out how to deal with it. And this was, in fact, what brought me into eventually the whole spiritual way of really understanding what prosperity and flow is, and to be able to create my way out. Mm-hmm. And so I created I started, found my way to a religious science church in Morristown, and started going there, and then they said, if you like what it was there, and we all sat in the back row kind of commiserating, because all the people that were having problems in their lives were sitting in the back row. So we said, you should take classes. And first thing I said was, I don't have any money to take classes. I can't even buy the book. And of course, the first thing the person next to me said is, we'll buy you the book. So I don't have any excuse not to take the class. And I got dragged kicking and screaming into really learning how to do conscious prayer and to learn to create out of that. And that's really how I came into the teaching, and how I really got my feet wet by really creating myself out of $1 million and creating myself back into prosperity.
I love this story, Ernie, because it's a good example of how dark it can get for someone. And now you've got this great book, Soul Currency, and you can recover from that. But it does take, I think that those times when we walk into those dark nights of the soul kind of thing, it's because it's an opportunity for us to grow, us to spiritually awaken, us to become aware of really what is taking my focus. Where am I putting my attention? Am I putting my attention on all the yucky stuff, or am I putting my attention on the stuff that's good and that I'm grateful for and that makes me happy? And it is. So let's talk about that, because it is about where we put our attention and intention, right?
That's correct, and part of it is that it's about literally allowing ourselves to think from a possibility standpoint, not necessarily it has to look a certain way. In other words, it has to look like a certain job or something of that type. You don't have to teach what you really like to do. It may be, in fact, a tool that you use in another profession, or you've created a situation where you're going to be able to use a lot of that. So, if you're a people person, it doesn't mean that you have to be a salesperson or something of that type, but it may be that you have an ability to get people to trust you, or when you make presentations to get certain things, the people will take a chance with you.
Right.
So there are a lot of different ways that these things look like, and the tendency is that it's the old Thomas Edison thing, that opportunity comes to you, but you don't recognize it because it wears overalls. And we kind of think that it has to look a certain way.
Right. And we're not recognizing the opportunity because of that.
Right. And we say, oh, gee, I got this, but but it's not exactly what I wanted.
And yet it's exactly what we wanted. We just didn't know.
Well, or it could be the next step.
Right,
away.
Leading to...
It could be one step away that we weren't quite ready to do it, but we think we are because we have to be, because we're desperate, and therefore what happens is that we kind of say, well, if it isn't exactly what I need, then I'm going to hold out. Well, you keep holding out, and it's sort of like being in a very desperate situation where if it doesn't happen, you don't have plan B or anything of that type. You just say, well, God let me down, or somehow it's not working.
Right. So, Ernest, in your book, Soul Currency, you use a lot of money investing words. I got to tell you, you use assets and capital. And since I don't have a stock portfolio or anything, it was I had to really slow myself down to understand what those things meant, because my brain doesn't operate that way. And in fact, I remembered as I was reading some of the parts of your book, I remembered in college, I failed my economics class.
Well, this is well below the level of economics.
It just felt like it when I was reading these words and different phrases that you use. It kind of, and I'm grateful for that, because I realize, for me personally, and I'm sure this is true for other people, that's one of the things that triggers me from a past experience that wasn't so good, and so then I have a charge on my money and financial situation, because for me, I failed economics, but. So therefore, it tells me I don't know how to deal with money. But I love what you talk about in the book, spiritual assets and spiritual capital. And let's talk about what those are.
Well, let's talk first about the language of Sundays, because the language of Sundays is about the gifts, God-given gifts. We talk about intrinsic divine self. That God is within each of us, and there's an infinite plethora of talent and almost every possibility. Well, you come Wednesday and you're balancing your checkbook,
mm-hmm.
and somehow spiritual gifts doesn't come to mind as you begin to realize that. And so what had occurred to me was there were a couple of things. One is the reason why this book was written was that people really never valued spiritual gifts, because gifts are for free. And in a sense, the mind, even though these gifts are divine gifts, our tendency is that somebody gives you a gift, it's certainly what we remember about it is that it was given possibly as a way to honor us, or to because that's the way it's done. So it's almost like trying to remember, what did you get 5-10 years ago, for your birthday?
Right.
What was the gift that you got? Well, you may not remember exactly what gifts you got, unless it's your favorite sweater or something that you use all the time. But what you might remember is how you felt during that, when you were on your 40th birthday, or or an important birthday that you had to share with somebody. So those are the things that it began to dawn on me that the language of Sundays really doesn't connect with the language that is important for us in our everyday lives to be able to activate us to do things. So one thing that I did was I said, okay, well, the gifts are wonderful, but assets, when you talk about them, sounds like something that is worth something. Like I have an asset.
Right, an asset. Yes,
land
it's
is
valued.
an asset. My ability to use my Rolodex is an asset.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden now, I don't have to connect spiritually with it and then come back from the spiritual world and try to figure out how to directly connect with it. I can just simply say a spiritual asset is something that's within me, and guess what? I do have some things that are of real value to me, and that's the first thing you do when you're really looking at a point where you're saying, I don't have anything, or what am I going to do? I need a job, or I don't. My accounts and my bank account's getting low. What am I going to do? It's great to talk about creating this stuff. What do I do? I don't seem to have anything, and you never. Often our self-talk about that, saying I don't have anything, really starts to translate and become very destructive.
Right.
You don't when you apply for a job and you're saying I don't have anything. What are you putting out to the universe?
Right.
What do you think? You think you're going to be surprised if you don't get the job?
Right.
So that's really the first thing is that you do have something. You have tremendous spiritual assets within you.
So
that's one of the reasons.
In your book, Ernie, you have a partial list of spiritual assets. You have, and there's 4 categories: intuition and guidance, higher personality traits, creativity, cultivated skills, and knowledge. And cultivated skills and knowledge is a spiritual asset. All of these things, I would not have personality traits. I would not have seen it as an asset.
Bonds and stocks and real estate, they're not on there. They're not on there.
No, I'm not seeing anything. Knowledge of mathematics, but you have underneath the skills, you have career training, friendship and social skills, physical condition, knowledge of the culture or the history, networking skills. And then your higher personality traits, which I like this list, is consideration, discernment, empathy, generosity, harmony, kindness, optimism, selflessness, persistence. And then with the intuition and guide, you've got this clairvoyance, faith in the outcome, faith in self. Those are kind of challenging things for people, to have faith in oneself.
Yes. They are. And it doesn't mean that you have to have every single one of them to be successful, but obviously to have the symphony play out the way you want it to play out, it needs to be present, and there's no formula or anything that does it. It's much like a creative symphony that Beethoven or any of the masters might have written. You have that symphony, and at any given time, you can be playing different parts of your spiritual assets in ways that you never thought were possible.
Right, and in ways they didn't work together. One of the things we talk about on Living Your Inspired Life is that you start right where you are. So perhaps to find at least one asset, spiritual asset of myself that I can begin to focus on, instead of, like you were saying earlier, the negative self-talk. To find a positive asset, like let's see, what do I have on this list? Kindness, and to focus on I am kind. Does that help you become aware of other spiritual assets?
Sure. When the minute you start to become kind, a lot of your fear disappears, because kindness is a form of love, and love and fear don't exist in the same space. So
wait, say that again, Ernie, for our listeners. What you just said, love and fear.
Love and fear don't exist in the same space at the same time.
I so love it when somebody else says what I've been talking about. Thank you.
So,
and that's true. They can't.
So kindness, generosity, even humor. Humor is a form of love.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kinds of things that also make you feel better, and also as they are discovering things in medicine, for instance.
Right.
They've discovered when they unravel the DNA that all of a sudden they have literally hundreds of thousands of photons that come out of the DNA. These are packets of light, and they've always wondered how the body could respond to itself, and they could never figure it out biochemically because this thing actually, the body is so complex that it actually responds at the speed of light or faster. And so all of a sudden now you do have this light that comes out, and you can begin to actually see it in a person that is having some difficulties as they begin to really embrace love.
Mm-hmm.
You actually see their face start to, the density in their face start to become lighter.
Yeah.
And the whole outlook becomes lighter. And then all of a sudden now you can see possibilities and you can think about things, and you're also open. Because I believe we receive, through our intuition and a lot of the things, we receive messages and other types of, get other kinds of help from the invisible world, or the spirit world as we would call it. And that also affects us. We also have to be ready to accept it, and you can't accept it if you're constantly holding fear, you're constantly seeing negativity, you have resentments, anger, things of those things. That just pulls you further and further away from where you want to be.
Right. So I want to read a quote from your book, Soul Currency, Ernie. You said, when intention and the energy of love are focused on spiritual assets, this transforms them into a powerful form of capital, which has an exponential growth potential when invested in a specific enterprise. Spiritual capital comes alive when we invest love in attaining a particular goal. Now, this quote, I wanted to read it because I get the idea of mixing intention and love and focusing it. But then when you said it transforms it into a powerful form of capital, which has a growth potential, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, capital is really nothing more than a resource. So it's descriptive of a resource. Our tendency is to think that capital is only money.
Yeah,
but we've talked about social capital. We can, in fact, researchers talk about now spiritual capital, and essentially there's a lot of things. In China they talk about human capital, so that it's not just money. People see that capital is the way that resources get used to create whatever the goal is. So it doesn't always have to be necessarily a company, or when I talk about enterprise, it could be really, if you're in the PTA, it could be it could be really finding out a new way to do parent-teacher conferences, or to prepare children and parents better for those conferences, that type of thing. So it's what you think is important, what you think is creative, that brings a sense of newness and fulfillment, because for some reason or another, even though we tend to like the familiar, we also tend to get I think a great deal of satisfaction out of accomplishing something new that we might even be afraid of in the very beginning. Right,
that maybe we were feeling challenged by. So capital as a resource, and then so to go back to using my spiritual asset of kindness as a resource that I want to invest. So you're saying, like, if I was doing the PTA thing, then my spiritual asset would be kindness, which would be what I would infuse with love to spend to give into the PTA.
Well,
to make the project work.
That these things tend to work in harmony. So kindness often gives way to generosity. It may involve passion. It may involve empathy for children and their parents. So those kinds of things the passion and connection to, say, a higher idea that can do greater good is something that is a very powerful vision that when people are involved in that, they work extra hard, they think about things. This is where creativity really is at its peak at times. So
and they
kindness
are invested.
is very important, but as I say, these things work in conjunction with each other. We take love, and it's hard to really divide everything into all aspects of love. But clearly, when you were saying love is really a currency, that's what it is. That is the essence of soul currency. Is that it is the currency of love, which we never think of much as a currency, because when we think of love, there's a whole lot of baggage attached to love.
Right.
And, that's why I say that really, in a sense, the currency is really sort of, shall we say, a divine currency. It's the essence of divinity, or essence of God that's within each of us that creates that possibility. And so the most important thing is to really make the distinction that we are individualized points of consciousness of the divine, as opposed to individuals that are really looking to become more spiritual or looking to find spirit or God, and have to connect in some way to it because we've either lost our way or think of ourselves as separate.
So, Ernie, I want to read another quote from your book. and you said, capitalizing on your spiritual assets requires more than developing a simple awareness of them. After you recognize your spiritual assets, you must embrace and incorporate their aliveness, power, and value in everything you do. You have the ability to shape your world creatively through your clarity of intention and the choices you make. Your spiritual assets have great value only because you use them in meaningful ways that build value and contribute to the world. I love that. Mm-hmm. I love that because I think it's very true. And to use my spiritual assets to make a contribution and use my spiritual assets to help me make the choices I want to make, like in terms of what kind of job do I want. If my spiritual asset that I'm focusing on is kindness, say, then that should inform me about what kind of job I want to get, right? I mean, so then I don't want to work at a job where I'm not feeling kind or loving towards people, right?
I think part of this is that it is an asset that you're carrying with you, and at any given time you can check in and just see how you're feeling about things.
Oh, I like that. Yes. Yes.
So as you begin to do that, you begin to. It's like anything else. There is a evolution or an evolvement of how you think about what you are doing. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be taking a job that you know is maybe a temporary thing, because you may find a great deal more satisfaction than you think. But even if you don't, it may be that's getting you ready for something else that's even better. And
wouldn't it
you
also
have to really look at it as being on that path of that right path that is that path of flow that is allowing you to do that. And so it's really important to not plant your seed and then have to dig it up every now and then to see if it's blooming.
Right. So let's look at it from this point of view too, because if we're aware of what our spiritual assets are, like kindness and I don't know what else is on your list, and we're in a job that we don't feel is being kind to us. I have a client who's been in her job for 25 years, and she's really been promoted and done well and learned a lot, but she's really unhappy, been really unhappy for several years. And part of it is because of the way the shift in management and leadership has changed, and it's not, I want to say, in alignment with the truth of who she is now. So, so like it doesn't meet her kindness levels, let's say, her spiritual assets. So wouldn't that be then an indicator that it's time to make a change? It's time that, like you're saying, maybe this is just one more step towards.
Well, it could be that she has outgrown the job.
Right.
And
a lot of people do that, and they don't want to let go of the job because they're making good money.
Yeah.
But so go on.
That's also a belief that I'm never going to find anything that's going to be as good.
Right.
And I think that kind of sells yourself short. I mean, if you took if you simply changed that thought into saying, I deserve more. I deserve more fulfillment, more more. I'm value. I contribute a lot. I deserve more value.
Well, let's talk about your
fulfillment.
Let's talk about your idea of counterfeit currencies. So, explain what that concept is.
Well, counterfeit currency, as you know, the real counterfeit currency is sort of having these counterfeit plates and creating $1,000 bills, which is getting harder and harder, but still a lot of people do it, and obviously the minute you're somewhat successful, you're going to get a lot of attention, and the Secret Service and the Treasury will be after you, mainly to preserve the U.S. currency, obviously, because they want to make sure there's, quote, the integrity of the currency. However, what I am talking about is equally important, and that is these are false ideas, and these are passed along. Well, I'm not good enough. It's tough,
Or I have to stay in this job.
Money is the root of all evil.
Right.
I'm successful, but I can never ever get over that hump. And they pass it. You pass it along, like you're passing a currency, like you're passing a phony
exchanging a dollar bill.
$100 bill. You pass this false belief to your friends or to your children or to anybody that will listen. And so you don't think that does as much damage to the economy as having phony $1 or $1,000 bills being passed along?
Okay, I want to tease this piece out because I think it's really important. You just said having a negative belief about money does damage to the economy. Let's talk about that.
What I'm saying is that...
But I agree with you on that. I think it's true.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is that if people really start out by thinking, hey, everything's hard, it's difficult, life is a bitch, that kind of thing. And you have to be careful. If you don't look out for yourself, nobody's going to look out for you, et cetera, et cetera. You find that you're living your life by these standards, and what happens is it cuts off a lot of opportunity. It makes things sometimes very difficult for you to even get past getting flow to get started in your life, because you get to a certain level and these beliefs kick in, and they become very disempowering. And that's the major thing, is that how disempowering is it when you start off by thinking, hey, it's very hard, or I'm never going to do this because people like me don't have, say, a graduate degree or a college education, and we're stuck doing, I'm stuck in this lifetime.
Well,
and that's not true.
And there's a belief system going around right now, because I have a kid in college, that when I get out of college, I'll have a college degree, but I won't have a job. And to me, that's now, everybody, there might be some statistics and facts out there that will point to that people will say, see, it's true. But I think it's a belief system. And the more people buy into that, the less opportunity the kids have to get a job with their degree. What do you think about that, Ernie?
Well, I think that's the case. I remember when I was in college, I often wondered what I was going to do. But I also pursued some things that I enjoyed doing, and not with the idea that I would ever, make a career out of it. But I ended up doing things, and then what happened was that my first job actually was that of a journalist. Now,
Oh, how
you
great.
know, I didn't. The last time I was ever on a newspaper was in high school, in junior in high school, where I was like an assistant editor. And when I was in college, I never even was a member of my college newspaper. And yet, what happened was that I did my junior year in India, and I always was interested in writing. I actually wrote a novel when I was a freshman in college, and I was always interested in creative writing. And so I took my junior year in India, and I happened to have I started writing some. When I got back, I wrote an article about India. I wrote an article about what was happening in Vietnam. I went to Vietnam as a tourist. This is
Wow.
1967, and I went to the demilitarized zone in Korea. So I started writing about those because I thought it was interesting, and it gave me a chance to be creative, and I knew that a lot of my fellow students would be interested in, and the school paper published it, and then
Wait, but so
apparently it got reprinted in the National Student News Service or
Ernie,
something like that.
so did this journalism thing happen because that was part of what you majored in? Because this is what I'm thinking.
No,
you know,
actually, I didn't major in journalism. I majored in history, and I had a minor in English, but I was not interested in classic English poets. I was more interested in creative writing. So I did, in a sense, major in creative writing. But again, when I ended up at the Wall Street Journal as my first job out of college, and not having ever gone to journalism school, not having a degree in journalism, not even having a degree major in English, but rather having a passion for writing and having a passion for creativity, and having a desire to write about things that I thought people would be very interested in. That's what got me my job. And I think the other thing is that there was a path that was there. As I was invited by my father to a dinner where there were people from that school, Amherst, and I happened to sit next to an older lady, and she started asking me, the kinds of things that I guess very curious and also I think very good, well-meaning older people would ask a college student is like, what are you going to do when you get out of college, and what would you like to do? And I told her I'd like to write, like to be a writer. I'd like to, and so.
So it doesn't sound like you had any of the counterfeit currency, any of the negative beliefs about what you could do when you got out that so many of these kids seem to be buying into right now. I have a niece.
That's right. That's exactly right. And part of it was that I had just spent a year on my own, going to school in India and watching death for the first time, going to Vietnam as a tourist, and hitchhiking my way through jungles in a jungle in Cambodia. God knows if my own son had done something like that, I would have. You
would have locked him up, I'm sure.
I would have freaked out.
Yeah.
But I mean, but I did it, and I didn't really tell my parents about it. And so when I came back, I was really a changed person because that kind of I had managed to survive. I'd proven a lot of things to myself that I could survive, and I could do things that I didn't think were that I thought were kind of risky, but they were kind of fun to do. And going to the demilitarized zone, sort of talking myself there, because in Korea they never had a peace treaty.
Right.
They have an armistice, and there was shooting going on.
Right.
So I mean, what the heck? When you're 20 years old, you want to find out about that.
So in your book, I just want to tap on some of these counterfeit currency ideas that you have in here, because I think it's true for many people. So you've listed a couple things like this unwillingness to change, and you say that's the illusion of safety. So the counterfeit currency is, you think, like my client who's been in a job for eons, this person thinks that they're safe in that job when that's an illusion. And
that's correct. And all you have to do is look at, for instance, IBM, which used to be, you have an entire career with IBM. Mm-hmm. And then in the 1980s, when they had a change in management, they had the biggest downsizing in corporate history.
Right.
Another safe place used to be the banks. You get a job at the bank, the bank's not going to go out of business, not going to have a problem. And yet you had this banking crisis, and the oldest and one of the largest banks in the country, Washington Mutual, went out of business, and everybody lost their job, and Morgan and Chase and people like that, which were thought to be, you spend your entire career at the bank.
Right. And now you don't.
You didn't, yeah. So you tried to be safe there. So there really isn't, there's only safety in terms of, I think, what you can contribute and what you see for yourself. And I think that as you get to a point where you realize that you are not, and your prosperity is not your job. Certainly having money coming in all the time is a helpful thing, but it's not your job. I mean, you get to a point where you're just unwilling to do it, even though you hate it.
So I so agree with you on that, I have to say. But there's one more that in your make-believe payoffs of counterfeit currency. You say finding the negative in every situation is the illusion of control. I'm a recovering control freak. I'm telling people that now. I'm a recovering control freak. But there is a place of finding the negative in every situation. There's people out there that like to plan for all contingencies. And if I can plan for all contingencies, and we've kind of been culturalized or pasteurized into thinking that if we can plan for everything, then there won't be any surprises, or I'll be prepared for when there's a bump in the road and all of that. But that is an illusion of control. And it does kind of shut us off from the being in the flow of what you were talking about earlier in the show, of being in the flow with the soul currency. Yeah?
Yeah, it actually disconnects you from really the creativity of what's coming from within. Mm-hmm. So if you have to stop everything to make sure that you've got whatever it is, the 8 or 9 months of savings in case you get laid off, well, you do, and that's not the worst thing in the world. But you have to just notice that the difference between your fear as you basically when you don't have it versus when you begin to have it. It doesn't mean that that's the panacea for everything that's going to go wrong. It's just something that makes you feel better about things.
Right.
Because there have been an awful lot of very successful entrepreneurs, including college kids,
right.
Really
right out of the box.
Yeah, right out of the box. And in fact, they've never heard of that, and they never would think of that.
Right.
They would go out, earn some money, and then invest it right in what they were doing, and maybe bootstrap themselves up or do whatever it is. Or if they were smart, they'd find a rich neighbor or uncle or somebody like that might believe in what they were saying, and they would. They're probably more successful, shall we say, millionaire college students today than there have ever been in all the years probably leading up to this.
That is really cool.
Put together.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That gives me hope for the future generations right there with you saying that. So, Ernie, we have 1 or 2 more minutes. I just wanted you to tap on, because I think this is what you were just talking about, is this idea of shareholders in your book or stakeholders.
Stakeholders.
So just you were just talking about people that believe in you. Is that a stakeholder?
Oh, absolutely. And you are stakeholders in millions of other people's lives too. So it goes all different ways. But you have a lot more people rooting for your success than you could even imagine. And that's why people feel so good when they hear stories about somebody that's overcome some great things or overcome adversity or whatever, because you are a stakeholder in the success of all those around you. And basically, of course, there are some direct stakeholders like your teachers and your friends and your parents and even the people that work with you and people that believed in you or even have invested in you.
Mm-hmm.
So you could take this to all different levels, but it becomes a huge thing. And the fact when you say we're all connected or we're just really one or two steps of separation, I don't think we're separated, but that's
right.
Everybody's saying you're seven steps,
7 degrees of separation.
Of separation. Well, you're really not separated. It's just the degree of consciousness and awareness of that you're connected. And so, there's 7 degrees of consciousness regarding your connection, and you can call all those people stakeholders in your life because they care what happens to you.
Ernest Chu, I am so grateful that we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining me today. The book is called Soul Currency: Investing Your Inner Wealth for Fulfillment and Abundance. And you can go to soulcurrency.org to find out more about Ernest and the work that he does and also to get the book. So thank you so much for joining us on Living Your Inspired Life. You've been listening to Living Your Inspired Life. If you have missed anything, go to our website, livingyourinspiredlife.org, and get tuned in and tuned up and develop your power perspective. So I'm just going to say, and so it is, namaste.